sitting in the hot seat here. Senator Wiener is expected to join us shortly if he can get here in time. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. And I really can't express enough in words how much I appreciate the work of the committee on the amendments and the work that Judy put into this prior to her retirement. So I definitely support the committee amendments and the way the bill is in print currently. As we know, California is experiencing a severe mental health crisis with rising rates of anxiety, depression, substance use, post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide, and other debilitating conditions. My bill, AB 941, proposes a solution to this crisis through the exploration of the therapeutic possibilities of psychedelic-assisted therapy. We need the data, the research, and the recommendations of experts in this promising field of therapeutics. Having the data and protocol recommendations will help us in legislating good policy regarding the use of psychedelics in clinical settings. AB 941 will create a work group under the California Health and Human Services Agency to study and recommend a framework for the clinical therapeutic use of psychedelic substances. These therapies have the potential to save countless lives. What this bill does not do is decriminalize any psychedelics. This is a true study bill. No one will be treated with psychedelics under this bill. Non-addictive natural psychedelic plants and fungi show significant potential in addressing various mental health conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, suicidal tendencies, end-of-life anxiety, depression, and substance use disorders. It is also particularly beneficial to those on the front lines, such as our veterans and first responders. In fact, I first got involved with this issue having met with Navy SEALs regarding the success that they had in these therapies, but they have to go across the border in order to get it. A study by the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies found that 88% of participants with severe post-traumatic stress disorder experienced a clinically significant reduction in post-traumatic stress scores after MDMA-assisted therapy. Additionally, 67% of participants in the MDMA study group no longer met the criteria for post-traumatic stress 2 months after the sessions. The promising research on psychedelic substances, their non-addictive nature, and the success stories from states like Oregon and Colorado show the urgency of exploring these innovative therapies. It's time for California to step up. Through the work group, AB 941, professionally licensed providers can identify specific conditions suitable for psychedelic-assisted therapy based on extensive research. And above all, AB 941 is proactive and forward-thinking approach to the mental health crisis in California and key to unlocking the therapeutic potential of psychedelics for use in clinical settings. I'm proud to have Senator Wiener here to co-present with me, as he has been a leader in this policy space for many years, and I'm very thankful for the partnership this important issue has created. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Waldron. Welcome, Senator Wiener.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here in full support of AB 941. Assemblymember Waldron and I are partnering together this year in the space of psychedelic therapy. Later this month or early February, we'll be introducing a Senate bill to create to legalize and create a structure for psychedelic-assisted therapy in line with the governor's veto message of our psychedelic decriminalization. Last year, we're grateful that the governor didn't simply say no, but indicated what he would say yes to, which was a therapeutic-focused bill. So we're going to introduce that bill. Assemblymember Waldron and I will be partnering on that, and I would ask that you support advancing this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other witnesses in support?
Madam Chair and members, Anthony Molina with New Approach Advocacy here in support on the bill, and we continue to look forward to working with Assemblymember Waldron and Senator Wiener on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any primary witnesses in opposition in the hearing room? Are there any witnesses who are any additional witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to committee. Assemblymember Carrillo.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's good to see you in that position. Congratulations. To the Senator and the Assembly member, I want to just say I applaud your tenacity and courage in continuing to bring this bill forward. I think the intention of what you're trying to move forward is compassionate treatment for individuals, and I still remember the testimony by the 9/11, September 11 firefighters that came from New York and other places to testify on the importance of how some substances have helped through PTSD. My concern then and my concern now, and I'm glad that you're doing the working group, has always been the distribution of substances. Public safety continues to be a priority to all of us as the state experiences a housing, homelessness, and fentanyl crisis. I want to make sure that we are creating innovative solutions for some of our biggest issues related to mental health and how some substances can be helpful and supportive in that. My concern is just simply on the medical personnel needed to be able to do these treatments, as well as ensuring that the public street sale of certain substances isn't harmful to individuals, and that we're not creating an opportunity for, quote unquote, for there to be more drugs on the street, but that we're actually creating the clinical approaches necessary for some hallucinogenics. So I'm happy to help support the conversation to move forward. But for me personally, and I know it's a concern shared by many others, is until we have that public safety component on lock, until we have the medical professionals behind it, supporting it, until we have the legalized sale of certain products, then it's still going to be very difficult to move forward. So I applaud your courage and the commitment and the intent to support and help individuals in need, but I worry about the public safety aspect in the overall conversation. Thank you.
Just comment. Thank you so much for that, because it is a concern for all of us. One of the things that this bill will authorize this work group to do is look at who are the folks in the clinical settings that would be licensed to do the therapeutic studies, what type of licensure is needed, so that we can be sure that the experienced people in this are actually doing the hands-on clinical therapies. So that's really important. One of the things that we've had to go up against as we work through these issues is, where is the data on this? Where is the research, anything that's documented? And I think what we need as a foundation is to get all of that put together in one place. So this work group would be comprised of folks who are working in the clinical settings, those who are experienced with the use of these type of therapies, or at least the drugs themselves. They're all natural, to allow for the best policy decisions by us. It's really hard for us. We're not the doctors and the clinicians to make the decisions. So bringing together the researchers and the policymakers is the best way to achieve the results that we're trying to achieve, and to hopefully save lives in that. And the goal is to do this in a clinical setting. So it won't, this bill, as I said, doesn't decriminalize anything or put anything out there. It's really a way to get the data, get the information, and bring it back to us as the policymakers so that we can move forward with the best decision.
Dr. Weber.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Before I go to what I was going to ask, I just want to piggyback off of something you just said. You said this is going to be done in a clinical setting. What clinical setting are you referring to?
So this will not do any of that. This just is the research part of it, to come up with those. What is the best clinical setting for it? Where would this occur? What would the standards be for whoever the clinician is that would be doing it? You know, what would the education levels be? All of those things. Because right now we don't have that. There are folks who are doing it, but they're not in this country. They either come from here and go over the border to do it, or they're in Germany, because it's not something that we've been doing here or is allowed in the United States at this point. So this work group will be studying that issue and bringing those recommendations to us.
Okay, so I guess I'm still confused, just maybe with the language that you're using, because when I think of clinic, when I think of trials, I'm thinking of, people that actually sign up for clinical trials. You have those that are tested that you compare to those that are untested. You monitor them for a while. But this work group isn't going to have that. So what exactly is it that they'll be researching to create, to bring forth to the legislature in 2026, I think?
Yeah, so there are studies out there, but they're kind of random and they're out there. We have to bring them all to one place. Like the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies had done a study recently regarding PTSD. And, so we have that information, but there are also people, as I mentioned, the Navy SEALs and those who are getting these therapeutic remedies administered to them now and showing results. And it's a way that we can bring what those groups have put together into this one work group, so we can figure out the best source of a recommendation to us as we move forward. There's been some significant achievements with it. And in order for us to be able to move forward with the therapies, we have to have this data. We have to have the knowledge of how it can best be administered. Because the people that have come forward and said that it has helped them has been significant. People with suicidal thoughts now no longer have that. And the way they use these therapies to help them go back into the situation and deal with their trauma with someone who's licensed and experienced is really eye-opening and innovative. And, we want to be able to look at it. And that's what this bill does. It doesn't authorize the therapeutic use or anything at all. It allows us to look at what the potentials are, try to get the data, try to get the information so that we can answer your questions. But without that, we're kind of still stumbling in the dark a little bit. So it's really the first step in order to, look to see the potential.
Yeah, and I've spoken with Senator Wiener about this many times as far as where is the data, especially in certain patient populations like pregnant patients, right? So, but I think some of the lingo that you were saying was just kind of tripping me up. And I guess my other question is, seeing that it was in June of 2023 that the FDA came out with the guidelines for clinical trials in this particular area, how are we going to have the data, the evidence-based scientific data that we use in the medical community by 2026 to say, yes, what you've done in this work group is something that we should adopt here in California? And are we also anticipating that by 2026 that the FDA would have come out and approved these medications at the same time?
So I think there are two things here. There is federally FDA-approved medicines, specific medicines for specific purposes, and that is on the track that it's on, which is good. The FDA has yet to approve anything cannabis-related for medicine, so I'm hoping that will happen. But this is a complementary track in terms of people using psychedelics under the supervision of a professional, like a therapist, which they are doing right now. Many, many people are doing that right now. And what we are planning to do with the Senate bill is to try to actually create that structure in terms of that therapeutic use. It doesn't need to be a doctor situation. That becomes with physicians and prescribing. That'll be driven by the FDA. But in terms of having a therapeutic setting, which again is happening right now, there are some very talented therapists out there. They're in the shadows right now because we have not brought them out of the shadows, and that's what we want to do. So none of this is the perfect way that we would want to do it in the perfect rational world where we would probably never have banned these substances in the first place, and we would not have shut down the research 50 years ago. But we're doing it in California. We're not waiting for the federal government to bless it. We've learned in the past that that's not necessarily the best way to go. We are rooting for the federal government to get it together and for the FDA to approve these therapies. But at the same time, we want to make sure that our folks, including our first responders who are suffering, have access not in the shadows, but in the sunlight to therapies that, as you'll recall from the 9/11 firefighter who's here, is literally saving people's lives and stopping them from killing themselves.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I guess my concern is what we've talked about before. No, physicians don't necessarily have to prescribe these medications or even necessarily be in this space. However, you do need to have some kind of studies that show its effectiveness and side effects and who should not be and potential long-term consequences. And so I think, once again, my concern in this space is we're putting a group of people together to do a study, which is great, but what is the material that they will be studying from, and how valid is that material that they're looking at?
Sure. Well, so just operating from the baseline today. So today, if you were, let's say you're a pregnant individual who says, someone told me that I might benefit from using mushrooms. What do you do today? You go on the internet, you look it up, you hope that maybe you know someone who hopefully knows what they're talking about, and then you sort of figure it out, and it may be awesome or it may not be. Well, I think we want to get to a point where in California you can have people who are actually certified by the state as individuals who know what they're talking about, so that you can say, oh, I can go to this person. State of California has said they have gone through the training and have the knowledge that they need, and I can ask them, I have this particular mental health condition. Will this be helpful or harmful to me? I am pregnant. Will this be helpful or harmful? And that compared to where we are now, whereas you have no one that you can know for sure is the right person, I think that is a market improvement, and I think that's where we want to go.
Yeah. Again, I look at what data are we looking at, and what is the validity of that data? Were these actually, randomized controlled trials, or is it all anecdotal stories from individuals? And we don't have the stories from people who actually had negative side effects or long-term consequences. And so, I think that you can't control what everybody does, but when the state says it's okay to do it, I do think that people assume at that point that it is safe. And so I just want to make sure that, at least for me, when I'm looking at something and when I'm supporting something, where is the data health-wise? And that's why I'm saying what this group, which I think is great, but what are they going to be looking at? What kind of studies are they going to be evaluating, especially given the fact that the regulations or the guidelines of how these clinical trials should be done just came out in June of 2023.
I just want to say that the group would be made up of research scientists with expertise in clinical studies and drug approval process under the FDA, as well as university researchers with expertise in psychedelics. I, as a legislator, can't speak to where the studies are or anything, but these folks that we want to put on this work group would be knowledgeable about what studies are out there, as well as persons with expertise in psychedelic therapy, medicine and public health, drug policy, harm reduction, youth drug education, and law enforcement folks would all be in this work group, because it is important. We need the studies. That's what this is about. We need the studies. We need the research. It would really be difficult for us as policymakers to move forward without those studies. So that's what we're trying to achieve with this.
Yeah. And just to be clear, there are already a number of peer-reviewed studies in places like the New England Journal of Medicine. So I don't want anyone to walk away thinking there are no scientific peer-reviewed studies. There are. The FDA has its own type of study in terms of approval of actual pharmaceutical interventions, but that doesn't mean that there aren't existing studies. There are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Assemblymember Schiavo.
Just so the guidelines that just came out in June, do you have an update or any information on if there are studies planned coming from those guidelines? Or, I mean, between 2.5 years from now, it seems like there could probably be a study that happens or multiple studies that happen. And now that there's guidelines, it makes it a little bit easier for folks to do that. I just don't know if you have any updated information on where that's going.
I'll just start off and then I'll let the senator. Our goal is to build upon that. And as the governor also indicated, we need the framework in order to move forward. So, we have those guidelines. We need to make them work with the types of policies that we're trying to do. And that's why we want to bring the experts together to actually build upon what those guidelines were.
And so there are groups that have been developing psychedelic-based pharmaceutical products for years, and those have been in process. They now have the structure from the FDA, and so that will all be moving forward, and that's great. So at some point, I don't know when, at some point that will mean that physicians will be able to write a prescription of a specific pharmaceutical for a specific condition. What we're talking about here is really a parallel track to that, because this is about people under the supervision of some sort of therapist, most likely, and this will be in the Senate bill, in something certified by the state, being able to use a product in a safe, controlled setting, not on their own, it will not be dependent on the FDA approving a particular product. Mm-hmm. That may be the end goal, and I hope we get there. But there are also people who they may not be in a situation where they need to have a physician overseeing every aspect of it. They can do it with a therapist, and that's been working well for a lot of people for decades. And we want to take it out of the shadows and into the sunlight.
And thank you. I appreciate this, and I appreciate you bringing this bill forward. I think that, at the end of the day, I did not support Senator Wiener's bill last time, though the veterans who came I had my, lobby in my office filled with veterans with incredibly powerful stories that moved me to tears about how it really made a difference for them. But I know there are a number of questions still remaining around exactly what, this bill is getting to. Who can prescribe this, administer it, take people through it? Because it sounds like it's a very intensive experience, right? Where you need to be with someone that you trust to help guide you through that, to get to the other side, right? And to get past PTSD or whatever it is, that you're working through. And so I think that this is a really important step of that process to figure out who's really qualified, what are the guidelines, what, is there a certification or anything that people need to go through to make sure that this is something that is done in a really therapeutic and safe and supportive way. So I'm happy to support it today because of that. And I know, and I think that there's continued conversations that we need to have around, other policy beyond this. But I think, delving into figuring out how this can make a difference. When people are telling me stories of, going to therapy for years and then going to, have this experience over a weekend and their lives are completely changed. When people are struggling and we see the high rate of suicide amongst veterans specifically, as the chair of the Military and Veteran Affairs Committee, you have to look at that seriously, and you have to take it seriously that this is changing people's lives in a really profound and important way so that they can be healthy and thrive. And not to mention, stories of how their families were being impacted, right, when people are dealing with, alcohol addiction and other things that they were using to kind of deal with the PTSD that they were struggling with. And all of that went away when they went through these treatments. So, just thank you for continuing to figure out where the wiggle room is and ways to move this issue forward, because I know at the end of the day, it's really the goal of helping people.
And with that, I just want to remind us that this is really very much responsive to the governor's veto message about what needed to be next steps. I want to appreciate our Vice Chair Waldron for bringing this forward, and Senator Wiener for ensuring that we have an opportunity to continue to do this. I think the strategy of convening a work group to really establish a governing framework for psychedelic-assisted therapy is very in keeping with the goals of ensuring that we have a multitude of therapies available to Californians. And with that, I will ask if you'd like to close, and then I will look for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee, for all the questions and discussion. And because we have so many questions and discussions, we really need to bring together experts in the field to help us as we navigate this issue. We don't want to ignore it. The potential could be great. As we've seen, it has helped a lot of people. And when you hear those stories, they are very moving. And, saving a life is worth it. So I really would hope for your aye vote and appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to do pass to appropriations? Assemblymember Haney moves. Majority Leader Aguiar-Curry seconds. With that, Secretary, call the roll, please.
Bonta?
Aye.
Bonta, aye. Waldron? Waldron, aye. Aguiar-Curry? Aguiar-Curry, aye. Arambula? Arambula, aye. Wendy Carrillo? Wendy Carrillo, aye. Flora? Flora, aye. Vince Fong? Haney? Haney, aye. Joan Sawyer? Joan Sawyer, aye. Mainshine? Mainshine not voting. McCarty? McCarty, aye. Joe Patterson? Joe Patterson not voting. Rodriguez? Rodriguez not voting. Santiago? Santiago, aye. Chavo? Chavo, aye. Weber?
Thank you. That bill passes with a vote of 11-0.